Hi, Morgan. Welcome to the Sir Thriving podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so glad we set this up and that we were able to make it work virtually. I know we live 5 hours apart, so I'm really glad that we're doing this. We're going to open up with the first question that we're going to do on every episode, and you can answer it in any context that you feel comfortable with. And that
Okay.
is, are you surviving or thriving?
I love this question. I think currently I'd say I'm thriving. I think I would be like doing myself a disservice if I didn't say that I was thriving right now. I have a lot of really awesome things going really well right now. And so I think my answer, I think I'm thriving.
I love that. It is such an interesting question, right? Because the line between surviving and thriving is very thin and looks very different for everyone, no matter
Mhm.
what their personal struggles are, or career, or relationship status, or what's going on in their life. So I really appreciate you being honest and vulnerable and sharing that. As a quick, bring listeners up to speed, Morgan and I have been friends since 2016. We know each other because we went to grad school together. We still technically are, but are not practicing as certified child life specialists. And we met
Mhm.
in grad school getting our master's at Towson, in Maryland. And we pretty much hit it off right when we were like little freshies
Yeah.
in grad school, and went through hell and back, and have really
We
watched
sure
each
did.
other seriously, and have really watched each other just like grow and mold into different phases, and really amazing woman. And Morgan especially has had really busy and crazy last 2 years, and so I'm just really excited to dig into this conversation with you. So just to open up and tell everyone, and introduce them to who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So as Lisa said, my name's Morgan. I'm 30 years old. I live in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where I also grew up. Um, I married my husband Phil, and I actually both grew up in the same town, and we met in high school. We got together kind of like midway through college, and we've been together ever since. We have a black lab named Lucy, and she's 2.5, and she's crazy, but she's amazing. She's my child. And I'm having a real child this year. um, I'm currently about 4 months pregnant with a baby boy, our first baby. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. As Lisa said, I'm a child life specialist also by training. I Lisa and I both worked in the field as child life specialists for a few years. We both kind of stepped away and we're in new career paths now. And yeah, kind of figuring things out.
Definitely a figuring things out phase. And like I said, I feel like you've had a really crazy last 2 years with, and of course, we're going to like jump into it, but medical decisions, life changing, and from being your friend, just observing a very different marital setup. And I don't mean that in any like bad way. I mean that logistically. So could you just like, for framing it, could you just quickly tell listeners what Phil, your husband, does for work?
Yes, I this is an important piece I left out. Yeah, so Phil is a merchant marine. He's an engineer on an oil tanker. So his ship transports oil typically in the Gulf of Mexico. So Phil will go and ship out for like 2.5 months at a time, and then he'll be home for 2.5 months at a time. And we've been doing that. I mean, that's all I know. He's been doing that since he graduated from college in 2014. When he's gone, we do get to talk a lot, luckily, because he's domestic. The Gulf, he has Wi-Fi most of the time, so we're able to text a lot and make phone calls like at least every couple of days. And then when he's home, he's got absolutely nothing to do, so he's around all the time, which is really fun.
It's been really cool to see you guys just really grow into your marriage, since I did know you from the boyfriend stage, like the late boyfriend
Mhm.
stage, but I can say the boyfriend stage,
Yeah.
into now this like wonderful, such like supportive marriage. You guys are really a couple that I admire and look up to when it comes to finding love myself. I really see a lot of partnership in you too. So I want you to know that just by
Love
being yourselves and being your wonderful, quirky marriage that you are, I love it.
that.
We love it. So keep doing what you're doing.
Oh my
And
God,
kind
thank
of
you. You're
going,
so sweet.
of course, and kind of going into, how that setup kind of can bring different challenges when it comes to decisions that you've had to make in the last couple of years. I know I've can keep alluding to it. Could you tell a little bit of people about what the BRCA gene is and kind of how you landed with the positive BRCA gene?
I have a BRCA1 gene mutation, which for anyone who doesn't know, so it's a genetic mutation in my BRCA1 gene pair. Everyone has BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene pairs, and because we have like hundreds of millions of gene pairs in our DNA, right? We get one, and they're pairs because we get one half or one copy from our dad and one copy from our mom. And the BRCA genes are directly related mainly to breast cancer and also ovarian cancer. So with a BRCA1 gene mutation, basically one half of my gene pair is damaged, which I got from my dad, who got it from his mom. So when you reproduce, you have a 50% chance of passing the mutated half of your gene onto your kids. You're either going to give them your good half of your bad half. So like when my dad had my brothers and I, he gave us either his good or his bad, and then we have another good half from our mom. And so with BRCA1 specifically, my lifetime risk of breast cancer was up to 87%. So basically
Wow.
87% likelihood I would get breast cancer in my life. Yeah. And it doesn't mean like in my 20s, my risk was still really low. And it basically means in your 30s, it goes up a little bit, up more in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So basically, by the time like my lifetime is over at, say, they put it at 90, it's 87% likely I will have gotten a breast cancer diagnosis. And then there's also a high risk of ovarian cancer. My risk of ovarian cancer remains at around 60%. And then we're also at heightened risk of like skin cancers, prostate cancer for men that carry it, pancreatic cancer. I mean, I've seen people with BRCA mutations get all kinds of cancer, so it's kind of like, what else is
Yeah.
there? And again, it was just inherited from my dad. I found out about it because he had gotten cancer when I was 13 when he was diagnosed with throat cancer. And then he had radiation. He was in remission. Then it came back. And then he had surgery. And then it came back. And then he had chemo. And then he passed away right before I turned 17. When my dad was going through treatment for a couple years, I know his doctors told my parents to really have their kids tested. They said, you know, you have three kids, they should really all be tested by the time they're about 25. And
Hmm.
then that's because that's when preventative screening typically starts. And so I always knew I needed to get tested, but then it was like, I'm in high school, I'm going to college. Oh, now I'm going to grad
Yeah.
school. Oh, now I'm
Right.
engaged. Now I'm getting married. Like there was all these things where I was like, it was never top of mind. And then I got married right before I turned 26. And then I think like kind of the dust settled after getting married. And I was like, oh, I was supposed to do this by 25. This has been like looming over my head for years. I should probably find out. I called them and set up my genetic screening. I met with a genetic counselor for like an hour. She was absolutely lovely. She went over like everything it means, whole family history. What do you want to know? What do you not want to know? Like, do you want to know everything or do you want to cross that bridge when you get there? Because you might get a negative test and you might be freaking out for no reason.
Hmm.
Or do you want like all the information now? And so it was lovely. It was like, I got to be like, you know what, actually, I don't need to know everything. But she kind of gave me a brief overview. And then I got my blood drawn and they said, like, are you sure? Like, you know, once this blood goes off, like, we're telling you what your result is, like, whether you like it or not. So basically, are you actually ready for this information? And I was. And then they said, they said, okay, you should hear back from us in about 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, awesome. I have 3 weeks. And then they called me like 8 days later and I was
Wow.
not expecting, yeah, I was not expecting this phone call. And the worst part, Lisa, is and I think I've told you this, but I had applied to like tons of jobs, like a handful of jobs in Boston. And I knew like the area code and the three numbers after that. I knew that that was Boston Hospital. So my phone starts ringing. It was on a Friday afternoon at like 4 o'clock, and my phone is
Yeah.
ringing from this Boston number. I'm like, oh my god, maybe it's Boston Children's calling me for a job. And so I pick up. I'm like, hello, and she's like, hi, is this Morgan? I'm like, yeah, it is Morgan. And then she's like, hi, this is so and so from genetic counselor at Dana Farber. And I was like, oh, I think like my heart just like sank, and I just was like, oh, that was not the phone call I was expecting. And then she was like, so unfortunately, we did find presence of the BRCA1 gene mutation. And I literally don't remember anything else from the phone call. I think I like collapsed on the floor in my bedroom. I just like cried because I thought I was ready for that. And then that moment, I was like, oh my God. And I didn't think I would react like that, but it was like this flood of emotions because I was like, holy crap, my whole life just changed.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that and educating listeners because, in full transparency, I didn't know anything about this until I became your friend.
Yeah.
And I think it just shows the lack of media coverage, entertainment coverage, whatever you want to call it, coverage and advocacy for this type of screening, medical inquiry, and advocacy and things that we should be doing as young women, especially if you
Hmm.
have history, especially if you have someone who has passed from cancer and how that can affect the family tree going down the line. There's one thing that I want to point out that it's interesting that you said because when you got that phone call, maybe it was a phase of life that you were thriving in. You were applying to all these jobs. You were so excited. You have your master's degree. You really want to do this job that you're passionate about. And then
Hmm.
in probably 30 seconds, you turned into maybe survival mode. And
Hmm.
now your whole life has shifted on what your wellness and health looks like and what your future becoming a mother, having kids, not having kids. Can you like speak a little bit about how a literal phone call went from a phase that you were thriving in life to now you have to figure out a way to survive almost.
Oh my God, yeah. That's such a good question and such a good point because it's true. Like I was like 26. I feel like the mid 20s are like a great time. They're confusing, but they're
Yeah.
kind of good because you kind of start figuring shit out and you're like doing
Yeah.
good. And like I was a newlywed. Like we just got married. Like we already have a house. Like we have, we just went on our honeymoon and it's, a new year. It's 2020. It's a new decade and whatever. And like I'm thinking ahead of like, okay, we're married now and I'm really trying to get my career started. And I'm also like, when do we think we want to have kids? Like all these things. And then all of a sudden, like she tells me I have this mutation, and I'm like, oh my god, nothing that I thought was going to be the way it is going to be the way it is. Like now in hindsight, I can see in the ways that like I thought it was going to change that it didn't, and how it's actually changed a lot of things like in a positive way for me. But like obviously in that moment, I was like, oh my god, I can't do anything the same. Now I have to like live every day in absolute fear of cancer. Like now I don't know what my journey to motherhood is going to be looking like. Now I don't know how I'm going to feed my children. Now I don't even if I'm going to see my children grow up. What if I have cancer already? Like what if I'm one of those people who's 26 and has breast cancer? Like I absolutely spiraled and I was for sure surviving.
Yeah, it's all of these questions that you maybe knew that you would have to ask yourself at some point, but then you get a phone call and now you literally have to look in the mirror and talk to your husband and be like, what are we going to
Yeah.
do? What are we going to do?
Like
What's
I
the
was
next
not
step?
thinking about any of this stuff. Like this was not
Yeah.
front of mind.
And can you share a little bit about how this has now, like, how after you found out what shaped your decisions moving forward to end up having like the surgery that you did?
Actually, it was weird. I started probably like early 2022. I think I started getting like these random shooting pains, like mostly in one spot, I think on my right side. But then sometimes it would happen on the left, and pain's not really actually a very common early symptom of breast cancer at all. Most people don't have any pain, but it was just so annoying and it was so like bothersome. So I called my doctor and I just asked to see her, and then she ordered a mammogram, which was like unplanned. I wasn't supposed to have mammograms yet. And then mammograms are really sensitive. They're still the number one tool to pick up breast cancer. But they can also, the problem with mammograms is if you have dense breast tissue, which a lot of people that are young do, and a lot of people that are like either thinner or their boobs are smaller have dense breasts just because there's like not a lot of fat there. Um,
Hmm.
Fat or dense breasts on a mammogram look white, and also cancer looks white on a mammogram. So mammograms can miss cancer in dense breasts, and they actually give you like a whole disclaimer about that. Um, but mammograms still remain like the most effective tool to pick up breast cancers, but that's usually where they'll also flip to do like an MRI because an MRI can sometimes pick up what a mammogram can't. So anyway, I got a mammogram and I got back these results. So when you get a mammogram, you get results number 1 through 5. 1 means definitely nothing. 5 means definitely cancer. 3 means probably benign. So basically, it's like we see something, we don't really know what it is. It's probably benign, but we can't tell you for sure. And so that was my results after my first mammogram, which I wasn't even expecting to have, never mind get like sketchy results. And so I was like, what? what? And so they were like, come back in 6 months, we'll follow up, make sure nothing changed, and then, come back 6 months after that. After my first one, I started kind of thinking about it. After my second one, I started really thinking about it, and I was like, okay, I can't do this. I also was maybe like 27. I maybe have turned 28 at this point, and I'm like, we don't want kids today. I don't know when I want kids, but I also know if I wait to do a mastectomy until after kids, I'm going to have to wait at least probably 5 or so years. And that's 5 years more of screening. That's years more of allowing my body to develop cancer. Probably late 2022, I think, is when I reached out to her and I decided it was time.
Wow, this just really sounds like a major steep learning curve that you went through. And I have to give you so much kudos because the grace that you had and calm, like authentic version of yourself. I was it scary to have that much of a learning curve and gather all of that information?
Oh, yeah, because like you're like, okay, where do I start, first of all? And the other thing is like, it's really hard because when you find like the online community or the Facebook group or whatever it is, you're seeing results from like A to Z. So you're seeing people that have had a smooth operation recovery, everything's perfect as it can be. And then you're also seeing the people who are having real like challenges with recovery or challenges with their surgery team or challenges with timing or like whatever it is. And then you're reading the stories about people who get delayed in surgery and then they find out they have cancer in the meantime. Like you're reading the spectrum of things. And there's all these different techniques that surgeons use, whether for the actual mastectomy or the reconstruction part. I mean, some surgeons go right into doing an implant. So they take the tissue out and they put the implant in one surgery, which is what I ended up having. Some people have these tissue expanders for months. Some people go flat for a little bit. And I was like, some people lose their nipples. Some people keep their nipples. And then, I learned about sensation and I remember the moment I read a comment on a Facebook group that you can't feel your nipples after surgery. This is so much TMI, but I remember I cried. I was like, wait a
Yeah.
second, what? Like, you can't feel anything. But I just remember being like, that is crazy. Like, that's inhuman. Like, you can't feel yourself. And I just remember crying because I was like, oh my God, this is my only option. And so I kind of just like let myself learn what I need to learn, observe, read comments or read posts when I felt comfortable doing it, shut things off when I needed to. And like you said, like cry when I needed to cry, think about things like this is a big deal or this is not a big deal or this is important to me or this is not something I'm going to worry
Yeah.
about. Like I just literally had to be like as self-aware as I possibly could to let myself like get through that.
Yeah, and finding community is so important in whatever anyone is going through in life, but especially when it's a chronic health thing that can be potentially fatal, that finding all this information, you can like inevitably on accident make your head spin and then not even know what to do for yourself. And so I can
Yeah.
imagine that all of that information gathering, while any community is great and well intended, right? That you can just gather all of this stuff and then you're looking left and right trying to find answers to things and
Mhm.
can kind of really have to learn how to compartmentalize and like what is actually best for you, your lifestyle, your situation, your setup, your future, all of
Mhm.
that.
I was lucky enough to like I was paying attention a lot to like a lot of stuff from the breasties community on Instagram, and I heard one person talk about like, you know, resensation, which is essentially like when they can either keep or preserve the nerves when you have a mastectomy so you can keep your feeling. And then I was like, wait a second, that's a thing. And then I started either paying attention or like researching more into that aspect of it and finding people that were sharing their story on Instagram about like that they went through a mastectomy with like this surgery team that preserves sensation. And that was really like a light at the end of the tunnel for me. That was really like hopeful for me. I remember being just so grateful to that existed and thinking like, oh my gosh, wait a second. And so I think I just like got more involved in kind of like that mindset of thinking like, wait, I could do this, maybe I could do this, maybe I could figure this out. And then I just I filled out an online consultation form with the surgery team in San Francisco. And I was like, I don't know when they'll get back to me. I don't know when they're booked out until. And I didn't get a consultation until like maybe 6 or 7 months later. They were so booked out, but
Wow.
I was like, so I had a lot of time to think about it too. Like I was lucky that way. Like, but from the time I reached out until I had a consultation, I had a lot of time. I could have canceled that consultation if I didn't feel ready. But over that kind of time period, I started to feel like more and more ready. And so I think I'm lucky that way. Like if there's if you're diagnosed with breast cancer, you don't really have time on your side in that way. Everything feels rushed and a lot of decisions feel made for you. So I'm very lucky that way, and being a previvor and stuff and having the luxury of time like I did, that really helped me feel, I think, ready, because I don't know how I would have felt if it was more rushed. I really don't.
Yeah, that I appreciate you saying that. That's such an important part, I think, of this whole story, that you've really had time on your side. And we recognize that many people don't, and often people
Hmm.
don't. And like you said, we've worked in healthcare before. Decisions are made for you, they're quick in a language that you
Hmm.
don't understand. And hospital time is nobody's time. And
Hmm.
so it can be very scattered and things like that. So it really sounds like you had a good, really healthy, like 6 months to live your life, thrive a little bit, and
Hmm.
really come to that decision. So, can you share with everyone how you turned that trip into something that was positive and something that you wanted to thrive in, but also really head on facing a life altering health event?
Yeah. I mean, I think I think like we had a lot of fun. I think I do. I'm learning this about myself as I get older too. I think I'm really good at compartmentalizing. So like, if I don't want to stress about something, I just like put it away, and then I like pretend it's not happening a little
You
bit. But
are.
yeah. um, so I think I was maybe a little numbed out, but no, I felt really ready because again, I had so much time and let myself really think about it. I also did a lot of self work leading up to my surgery, which I'm really glad I did. I got really into yoga. I mean, like, I like yoga, but this was the most yoga I've ever done, which I think is just good I think it helped me in recovery physically a lot just because of like flexibility and strength. But I also would do yoga and then a meditation after a lot. I would either do it every morning or every night or both. And so I tried to look for meditations that were really focused around either like strength or gratitude or like perspective or whatever it was, just to try to get myself in like the healthiest mind space I could, and reminding myself that, like, again, this is such a gift to be able to have planned this and be able to do this before I have a breast cancer diagnosis, be able to make this choice for myself. Like, I just gave myself that perspective of this is such a gift. And so I'm
Yeah.
really lucky to be doing this. And this was a full choice of mine. Like, although it was, an amputation and it was traumatic in ways, it was still a choice that I was able to make. Um, and so I just kind of kept myself in that mindset. And then leading up, I had like my crew of people. Like, I had my mom and my brother and my best friends, and like it was so much fun. And Phil, sorry, my
Yeah.
husband was there too. Oh my god. Um,
Sorry, Phil.
sorry, Phil. See, I forget. He's like gone for so much. I just forget sometimes.
But
But
yeah, but also really quick for context, as like you explained earlier, Phil flew in from out of the country straight to San Francisco, because he was on.
I would have loved to have him home just like in my 2 weeks leading up of like kind of stressing and having anxiety about it. But like he wasn't here. I was just here alone, like packing myself and getting myself on a plane.
Yeah,
No, but I mean, it was awesome. I mean, you guys all were so amazing. My friends made t-shirts. You guys did like all these decorations, the balloons that
yeah,
said Morgan's titty trip. Like, we had so much fun, and we planned because it was San Francisco. I don't think any of us have ever been there before. So we made a trip out of it. We had a whole day where we did like all of the touristy things. We took all the cute pictures, we got all the good food, and we just like enjoyed ourselves on the trip a little bit, which also I think for me was helpful in just like distraction, like literally just distracting my brain. And we got everything important out of the way, like the COVID tests and all that good stuff, all the pre-screening, and then we went and had fun. And then, I had my support system. You guys all gave me a huge hug on my way out the door when I was bawling my eyes out.
yeah,
And then you were all there when I came back, like told me all about Alcatraz when I was like knocked out on anesthesia. Like, it was
yeah.
awesome. I was so lucky. It was amazing.
And I just loved your perspective going into that trip when you were telling us, hey, this is the date. Would love for you guys to fly out if it's feasible on your end in your personal life. We can do XYZ. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't think I would have done that. Have five or six people who are not my husband or my mother fly out across the country to literally just banter around and hop around San Francisco, California before I have a life altering surgery. I literally don't think I would have done that. So I just give you a lot of credit for having that perspective. And it just really shows how headstrong you are and how mentally your strength has really carried you through this. So I want to recognize that, but also just the fun that we had and distraction is important. We
Mhm.
are by trade child life specialists. And so
Yeah.
that distraction, I'm sure really, really helped you. And I hope it did.
Mhm.
And I'm glad if it did. But yeah, we
It
just had
definitely did.
fun. And yeah, and that little bit of pocket of thriving right before you went into this really big procedure, I think was
Mhm.
really important and a healthy space that we all could share and a memory that we all really reminisce
On
about.
that note too, like I'm so lucky that like just being in this previvor space and like having this mutation, like I really am so lucky that every single person around me, at least to my face, I don't know if anybody else, but like also if they're not saying it to my face, then screw them. But like everyone's been so supportive of me. There are a lot of people that don't have that experience where they have people that say like, well, you don't even have cancer, or like, what are you so worried about? Like you're making this life altering decision based on fear. Like, don't be
Yeah.
dramatic, blah, blah, blah. Like, some people get like really negative, no, and like no support from people. And so I'm super lucky that like you guys were all like so supportive of me. And like that just made a world of a difference for me too, because it helped me. Because I did, obviously, in my head, I went back and forth like, is this dramatic? I mean, I really changed my body. I even still do it sometimes. I'm like, did I really need to like change my boobs for the rest of my life? Like, I really have to live with these for the rest of my life, and they're fine. But sometimes I'm like, they're
Yeah.
not the same as they were. And I do still go back and forth with them. Like, maybe I was never going to get cancer. Maybe this was stupid. But
Yeah.
I'm so lucky to have like support.
I know that you found a lot of support and camaraderie and community in the Breasties community that was founded by Paige. Can you tell a little bit about your experience entering that community, participating in it, and just really finding support for yourself while helping others?
Yeah, I love this. The Breasties is amazing. I found them probably, I think on Instagram, because I think I found Paige first. Because her handle is Paige Previvor, and that's what I started kind of like searching either Bracco or Previvor. So I found the Breasties through her for sure, and it was really the first space that was like definitely, and it's not only young women, like women of every age and people of every age. That not everybody even identifies as a woman, but people of every age are in the community. But that felt like, at least in the beginning, like, oh my God, this girl is like literally the same age as me, and she's already had her mastectomy, and look at her, she's thriving. Like she's giving recommendations on better bathing suit styles to fit your foobs, and she's also like talking about the hard times, and she's talking about the good times. And I remember being like, oh my God, that's the first time I really felt not alone, because while I had wonderful support from all my friends and family, nobody gets it. Like I do not know a
Yeah.
single person in real life that is also 26 and just found out she has a BRCA mutation. So that was huge for me. And the Facebook groups I found initially were a lot of like older women I found. So I just felt like it was just different. Like that was hard for me. Like I'm like, no one else is 26 and wondering if they need to get a mastectomy. Like this is hard. So I think that's really what like drew me in the beginning. And then I've just kind of like followed them. Like they're just doing so many amazing things. Like creating the community by itself is amazing because people feel like they can come to this space and it's a safe space. They also, I love that they're inclusive of, it's a really hard place to be in, like where you're a previvor. It's really hard to be in a room with someone who's a survivor or somebody that's actively battling like breast cancer, because you, like, this happened to me at Camp Breasty last year. I felt immediately like invalidated, and it wasn't anyone's fault. It was me in my own head, but I was immediately like, okay, shut up. You're not allowed to share your story because her story is way harder than yours. And
Yeah.
because she has cancer, or she had cancer, and she is in a completely different space than you are. Like you are so lucky, like
Yeah.
you're not allowed to talk. And that was me, myself, in my own brain. But like the Breasties really drives home that like everyone is welcome here, and like previvors are welcome here. It's founded, two of the founding members are previvors, um, which is amazing. So it makes you feel more welcome, and like you're like, my story does matter. And like I don't know, that was like a really wonderful thing I think that I found about the Breasties in the beginning. And then I just started kind of like, where I got like more involved is really kind of last year. I got they have this retreat every year. It's essentially like a retreat slash not really like a conference. I guess it's more like a retreat, but they call it Camp Breasty. And it was on hold during COVID. And they had it for the first time last summer. And so I went and I was like, you know what? I don't know anybody. I'm going alone. Like, how am I going to make sure I make friends? So I was like, I'm going to sign up to be a cabin leader.
Yeah,
And
I
so
love
I
that.
was like, never been to a breasty event. They hold events like randomly throughout the year. Never been to an event, never done anything like this, but I'll just be a cabin leader. And they accepted me.
Yeah, just go
Um,
for it. It really speaks to the power of community, and I encourage anyone listening to this to find their community, whether that's
mhm.
fitness, wellness, health, a sport, literally whatever it is, to like find your people. If that's something in your career or anything that you're going, and it really speaks to Paige and the Breasties about how important it is, community is for them. So
Yeah.
kudos to them. Shout out to them. Um,
Yeah.
Transitioning into just general support, how can a friend or family member help someone going through finding out the BRCA information or double mastectomy? What did you find like was most helpful to be received?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just, again, I was so lucky that everybody was super supportive. And I mean, like my friends, like you guys were all so wonderful and like, wait, I don't understand what this means. Explain it to me. Or like, we're here for you. I don't even know what that means, but like, here's, you guys sent me what whoopie pies and a brownie Alexis dropped off, like
Yeah.
sweets and flowers. Like that was so kind.
Yeah.
I just remember being
I
like,
don't
oh
even know
my
what
God,
this
that's
means,
so
but here are
nice.
flowers because I
Yeah,
love you.
yeah, it sounds emotional. Here's like a cookie. But like, no, really, I mean, just being there for someone listening, like, I'm so lucky that everybody was just like, tell me about it or like dump it on me, or if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to talk about it. And actually, my brother said to me, Morgan, you've always had, it's always been there. Like, you just now know about it. And at the time, I was kind of like, shut up. Like, this is still a big deal. Like, what's your point? That's not nice. But as over time, I've come to realize, like, he was so right. Like, that's where I think my perspective flipped, where I was like, you're right. It has always been there, but now I'm lucky I know about it. And so like now I
Yeah.
get to make all these decisions and take this into my own hands.
I know recently you won a sponsorship with Bobby Mommy, which is infant formula. And
Mhm.
can you just share a little bit about that experience and how that has shaped you now becoming a mom and expecting in the summer?
Yeah, so Bobby's amazing. So Bobby's like a organic infant formula brand. It's a European recipe formula, and as we all know, Europe has much stricter food regulations than the US. Like we feed our kids Fritos and they don't. Um things like that. So it's a European recipe,
True.
so it's a really clean, awesome, organic, yeah, infant formula. And they partnered. They actually, like the founders, it's all women founded, and all the women that are like CEOs and in the board on the group are really on the brand are really cool. They found out, actually, I think it stemmed from, so when you have a baby, when a woman has a baby, if you have insurance, your insurance will cover a free breast pump for you. And so once you have a baby, your insurance company is like, awesome, congratulations, here's your free breast pump. But people that don't have breasts, that can't breastfeed, like they're like, okay, great, I don't need that. I have to feed my baby formula, or I need to acquire donor milk. Are you going to help me with that? And the insurance
Yeah.
companies are like, nope, nope, you get a pump or nothing. So basically the CEO of Bobby was like, that's crazy. This is not cool. So she kind of started like, there's a petition online that people can sign. And they're kind of like started the fight toward like changing that. And that led them to the Breasties. I believe actually one of the Breasties founding members, she was either pregnant or having her baby. And she's the one who reached out like via DMs to Bobby and was like, thank you for all the work you're doing for like moms that need to feed formula. Like I have a whole community of women who have only one option is to feed their kids formula. Like, would you be interested in some type of like a partnership? I think. And Bobby immediately was like, oh, absolutely. So they sponsor all these moms that have, no other way to feed their babies. For you get an entire year of formula, baby formula, from the day your baby's born until the day they turn 1 year old. You get a whole year supply of formula for them, which is incredible. Because they're kind of like, this is crazy. Like, you guys don't need breast pumps, but you need help other ways. And like, let's show how impactful this can be. And so we can bring that to like Capitol Hill when we're trying to change insurance policy to show them.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing and so exciting for you. It is crazy to me how women in this situation can just feel so dismissed by insurance companies. And it just speaks volumes to how our like healthcare setup really just is unaware about certain women's bodies
Hmm.
and yeah, right.
Yep.
How they're just not set up for success. And to your point, you said, I don't need a breast pump. I need something for my kid to literally survive. Like, talk about thriving
Yes.
or surviving.
And, you go down the depths of the internet where people are still so polarized. It's such a polarizing conversation between like breastfeeding versus fed is best. And like, you can read some terrible comments from people even today. Like, Bobby will post videos of like celebrities or people that they're sponsoring that are like feeding their baby formula, and the things that people comment on those posts are like so disheartening, and you're like, oh my god, I'm
Wow.
gonna get so much hate for feeding my baby formula. Like, I was formula fed. My mom never tried breastfeeding. She was like, I'm not
Yeah.
into it, I'm not doing it, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever even had, I don't even know if I ever would have breastfed. I never had an emotional connection to the idea of breastfeeding, but once it was, the thought of it was taken away from me, I was like, oh shoot, I don't know if I can do that. And then you start to feel like, oh my god, my dad didn't see me graduate from high school, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if it could have been something as simple as this, I know he would have done that. He didn't get to
Yeah.
see me graduate high school, college, grad school, get married. He's not going to meet his grandkids. Like, he would have done anything he could have to make sure that that didn't happen. So I'm gonna not have the surgery. I get to breastfeed my kids, but then I die before they graduate high school. That's so stupid
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my brain. That's how I kind of weigh
No,
it
it's
out
such a
anyway.
yeah, it's such a polarizing conversation about breastfeeding first, fed is best. And I'm sure in the depths of the interwebs, there are people screaming at each other about that topic, but who have
Oh yeah.
never been faced with a decision or diagnosis, like all the women in this community.
Yeah.
Pivoting a little bit, what are you just most excited about becoming a mom?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I'm terrified. No, no, I'm not. I mean, I am. I'm like, parenting sounds really scary. I'm like, are they gonna like get in trouble in school? Are they gonna like break an arm on the playground? Like, I'm scared of all that stuff. No, I'm really excited about just like the adventure of it. Like, I think it's going to be really fun to be parents with Phil. I mean, like, I know that there are going to be nights that like we're, throwing daggers at each other. Like, I love the meme that's
Who
like,
doesn't?
yeah, I love the meme that's like parents that are like, we can't yell and we can't turn on each other. That's exactly what he wants, like about their newborn baby. Like, I'm kind of excited for all of that. And I think like I'm just excited to see Phil as a dad, and I'm excited to like just see our kids grow up and see who they turn into. I think that's just gonna be so much fun. And I seeing how much my mom loves being a grandma to my nieces is like I also just like want to give her that gift, and then my in-laws the gift of like having a grandchild so much.
Yeah.
I just think it's so cool that we can like make our own people. I'm
Yeah.
like, I get to bring
It's
more people into this world for my family to love.
Yeah, your kid's not gonna get in trouble at school. They're gonna win best dressed for sure. As like a closing question discussion, how has all of this that we talked about today in any context shaped your outlook on the surviving versus thriving concept that I plan to cover in this podcast?
I love that. I mean, I think, like I've said a lot in this whole, I mean, conversation, like I'm very lucky. I just like, that's something I always go back to is like how lucky I am. How lucky I am that like, yeah, I found out I have BRCA mutation, but I would have never found out about that if my dad's family also hadn't done that research. And like, my dad has one sister that was like, she got diagnosed with breast cancer, like maybe young 50s, I think. And she was like, this is weird. There's too much of this in the family. And so she's the person who went and first got genetic testing done, and she discovered the presence of the mutation. And so, like, I'm so grateful for that, because if she didn't do that, then my dad wouldn't have known, and then I wouldn't have known. And so, like, kind of every reason I'm here is, I think, because of other people. And from that to the breasties community, I would have never found my surgeon. I would have never felt confident enough for surgery. I would have never felt supported if it weren't for other people. And so, and like, I, had to lose my dad at such a young age. And obviously that shaped so much of like how every moment ever since has gone for me. Um, and so I feel like I'm just like almost just like grateful for the circumstances that have like brought me here. And it gives me so much perspective where it's like, there are some
Yeah.
days where like I'm spilling my coffee on myself and I'm tripping and my clothes are wrinkly when I'm trying to run out the door. I'm late for work, like whatever it is. We have no milk. I
Yeah.
can't make breakfast. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally barely surviving today. But like, which is fine. Like we're all allowed to have those days, but I think there's also like most of the time I'm like, I am so lucky and I'm thriving.
Love that. That is such a warm answer, and it's everything that I hope for people to find in this space and hear in this space, that there will be pockets in life where you feel like you're just surviving, but there can also be pockets in life where you feel like you're thriving. And like I said, you are so headstrong. I have loved hearing your story, and thank you for educating me and all of our friends and everyone around us and anyone who's going to touch this podcast episode. It is such an important conversation. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story and just coming on. And thank you for being such a great friend. I'm
Yeah.
so excited for you to become a mom and Phil to become a dad. And I'm just so grateful that you took the time out of your day to do this podcast episode. Any last words you want to share or insight?
If anybody wants to find me and like message me, if somebody like I do know some people that have come to me, like whether it's in DMs and Instagram or in real life, that are like, my mom has a BRCA mutation and I'm terrified to find out if I have one. Like things like that. If you need any support, like please just message me, like because it's for anyone. I mean, like some a lot of people have. I read this quote one time that was like, a lot of previvors are people who have watched a loved one go through cancer, and so that adds a whole other layer of like difficulty to it, especially the genetic testing piece and then navigating it after, because you're so scared of like whatever happened to your loved one happening to you.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really scary, hard space to be in. And like I said before, I don't know anybody and I would be like nowhere without community. So I want to be that community for anyone who needs it. If anyone needs anything, if they need advice or they just want to like vent or tell their story or ask like where I had my surgery, whatever it is, like please message me. I'm like more than happy to be here for you.
Love that. And thank you so much for adding that. It's so important. Morgan is your girl. Morgan's your girl. She is a girl's girl. She's a cheerleader. She will be in your corner for everything. Morgan, thank you so much for coming on the Thriving podcast. I am so glad we were able to make this work. I can't wait for listeners to just hear this amazing episode. Thank you. So thank you again.
Yay, thank you. This was so much fun. I loved it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sir Thriving. I hope you took some helpful information away from it and are feeling inspired. If you know someone who is surviving or thriving and would benefit from hearing this episode, feel free to send it over to them. Remember, sharing is caring. To leave a review or rating of the show, head to Spotify to follow, rate, and let me know what you think. All information about today's episode, guest, and podcast social handles will be in the description, so don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date.